Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Red Earth Production Studios for another edition of YBM Cast with Matt and Brian. Always want to thank our sponsors because YBM Cast is powered by Game 7 Baseball. Dave and Dave doing a great job. Season's right around the corner. Everybody in full swing, moving towards those tournaments. If you're not in the tournaments you want to be, check out game7baseball.com. Register your team today and get yourself going. Great venues across the Midwest, from Tennessee to Kentucky to Missouri to Illinois. So get yourself signed up. Dave and Dave, big shout out. Keep doing what you're doing, guys. We're going to be out at Grand Slam Ballpark ourselves this summer having some fun. Always love to be at the ballpark. So we're looking forward to it. We have on the show today Mr. Kenny Seifert of MSHSAA, that is the Missouri State High School Athletic Activities Association. Kenny, thanks for joining us today, man.
Glad to be here, gentlemen. And isn't it amazing what 8 or 9 days in the change of weather can make you feel, from hunkering down and trying to stay warm to the sun coming out going, my goodness, we must be getting close to baseball season. So I can tell by the smile on you guys' faces that you got that feeling, and I know we do too. So what a difference a week makes, but we're always glad to be here.
That's awesome. That's the way to open the show right there, bro.
It's amazing. You get outside and everybody's smiling.
And by the way, you can actually see some of their smiles now.
Exactly.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, we're hoping we can see more of that. So we're going to start off today. We left off the last conversation, and we're working through some of these things. I've been on the MSHSAA website and looking at districts and districting, and we know there's the new class certification, or the class, structure. And we've been talking to some of the coaches, because some of those coaches were on a bubble. We were talking with New Allen from St. Charles West High School, Coach Hill, Zumwalt East, kind of feeling that bubble a little bit from 5 to 6. So what can you tell us here about those things?
Well, needless to say, there's no system ever perfect. Any school that is in the upper end of a classification and is one of the bigger schools in a class is going to think it's the greatest system ever. And all of the schools who are the smallest schools in a class would like to move to another state and try it again, simply because no one likes to be the smallest school in a classification. But unfortunately, when you draw lines, unless you're willing to have 587 different classes, which means one school in each class, you are going to have largest schools in a class, and you're going to have the smallest schools in a class, and you have to be able to deal with that. But needless to say, through the years, and a lot of studies and a lot of information and feedback we got from our membership schools, is there were some consistent concerns about disparities, of which one was people weren't so disgruntled with how many schools were in their class. They were more concerned about the size of their school compared to the size of the larger schools in the class. And when you get to a situation where sometimes a school may have triple the enrollment, then yes, in some sports that becomes really, really difficult to compete in, right?
Right.
Maybe not so much in the sport of tennis, or maybe not so much in the sport of golf, where you have lesser kids that are playing at a particular time. But in the sport of football, a school that is 3 times the size of another school, then they absolutely are at a physical advantage just from a number standpoint, from a competitive standpoint. So we went through a new classification process where excluding class 1 in every sport. Class 1 is kind of it's not the rule, it's the exception. Because in class 1, we have some schools that are so small in enrollment, example, 25 students. Wow. That you don't have enough schools that only have 50 students and less to keep somewhat of a ratio there. But everything excluding class 1, from class 2 on up, based upon what sport it is and how many classes we have, no school is going to be over twice the size of the smallest school in that class. Okay. That's how we came to the determination of how many classes we're going to have. So in football, we're going to have 6 classes. In basketball this year, we went from 5 up to 6 classes. And so we had to move that needle a little bit to meet that ratio of the largest discrepancy from the smallest to the largest school in a class is a number no greater than the number 2, except for class 1. In class 1, we simply cannot make that applicable. And the smaller schools understand that concept. So that's where we start. We do our classifications there. After we and by the way, the old 1.35 multiplier factor that we've been dealing with for 12 or 14 years, for non-public schools, that is gone.
Oh, wow.
Everyone's enrollment, when I say everyone, I mean every single school in our state that is registered with MSHSAA, their enrollment is based upon their raw numbers, even the non-public schools. From there, we then have what is called a championship factor. And a championship factor is a kind of a ratio numbering system that gets applied to all non-public schools. Basically meaning if a non-public school has shown a history of success in a particular sport, that success may allow them to either stay in the current class they're in, they may actually elevate to one class larger than what their raw enrollment dictates. They actually have the ability to go up 2 more classes than what their raw enrollment determines. And for every non-public school that gets bumped up into a class above them or 2 classes above them, then the lowest school enrollment in that class drops down 1, so we can keep the ratio and the same number of schools in those classes. Now, that's a crash course. That's kind of a Cliff Notes version. You almost have to be a statistician to keep up with the algorithm of it. But in a nutshell, that's really kind of the gist of it.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah, but
that's great.
I mean,
honestly,
I'm going to take away from this in a very basic form because I think this is the best I can do. I'm no statistician. But the thought process that says 2 times, right? So you in just a very basic form, right there what you're dealing with, correct? I mean, that makes it pretty simple in that respect. I know that I'm not going to deal with a school that is more than 2 times my enrollment. That's basically it, right?
That is basically it, yes. The only way that changes, gentlemen, is when I talked about the championship factor. So let's say we have non-public school A. I won't use any names. And they have had a lot of success over the past 6 years.
I can give you a couple names.
Yeah. So let's say that non-public school A happens to be in class 2 based upon their raw enrollment. But they have had an enormous amount of success in a particular sport, and they get bumped up to class 3. Let's just say that they go 1 class. Their enrollment is nowhere close to being within that 2.0 ratio. But that 2.0 ratio is what we used to originally establish our enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
If you are rolled up because of your championship factor, those numbers are no longer applied.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So you could have non-public school A that has 300 students in class 2, and maybe they go up to class 3, and the top school in class 3 has 1,100 students. Well, you no longer meet that 2.0 ratio, but that 2.0 ratio was established prior to the championship factor being applied.
And I think this, to me, Kenny, is where we want to, if we're talking about these things, this gives the parents, this gives people out there that are watching an opportunity to understand what's going on, because how many people are going and looking or really know where to go to find this information? And then they're sitting in the stands going, why are we here? And that team's, and I think this gives you, like it or don't like it, but here it is. You guys have to take some point where numbers and common sense kind of fold into each other, correct?
Absolutely. And the other element that I'm going to add, when we talk about championship factor with non-public schools, we all fall in the trap of the only ones that we talk about are the ones that haven't all the successes, right? That kind of becomes the sensitive nerve for everyone. So the old policy that we had that glumped every non-public school into the same category, which was the 1.35 multiplier factor. Well, okay, so maybe that has some effect on the schools that are having a lot of success. But unfortunately, some of the non-public schools that are not having success, you're penalizing them by throwing them up into a higher class when they're struggling competing in the current class that they're in. This formula here allows the non-public schools that are having an enormous amount of success to probably compete against people that are they can be competitive with. And the non-public schools who maybe are not having a certain amount of successes in specific sports, they get to stay in the class of their raw enrollment, and they're not getting drug up with the ones that are having success. So I think it's a better formula than the one size fits all concept that we used to use.
Gotcha. Now, do you know when the class and district assignments for the spring are coming out?
Yes, for the spring, we have moved it back. And we're moving it back because of all the changes that we've been making all year long from the alternate fall season. We have moved it back to March 31st. The original scheduled date was actually this coming Friday, the 12th. But because of just, again, really everything COVID related, we're trying to wait as long as we can to get as accurate a numbers as we can. Because, again, it all comes down to the accuracy of the numbers. So we wanted to give schools an opportunity to find out, okay, how many of your student athletes are going to play in the alternate fall season? How many of them are going to play in the spring season? How many are going to be a dual sport athlete? Or how many of them maybe just chose one and said, I'm not going to do the other because it's too much to juggle with? So we wanted to give them a time to have their practices and get through their alternate fall season, or at least a portion of it, so they had a better view of what their real numbers were. And that allows us then to do a better job of classifying and then assigning our districts.
Oh, very good.
Nice.
So
well, at least we know now.
Yeah. And so everybody kind of knows where we're going to be going and what we're seeing. Because most of the schedules, baseball starts at about that time, correct?
They'll actually be playing a few games prior to us coming out with the assignments. But I can promise you on that, whenever March 31st is, I don't know if it's a Friday morning or when it is. But I can promise you at 8:00 that morning, every athletic everything for the spring sport is going to be on the mission website at one time. And of course, it's probably going to crash trying to figure out exactly what class they're in, number one, what district they're in, number two, and who their opponents are. Yeah, it's an exciting time. It's a pretty cool deal.
It is.
Well, we're going to have to look at that ourselves and make sure maybe we come in and do something, but that'll be fun. Next question here. Next thought process, rule changes. I know there's always sometimes, tweaks to rules upcoming season. Is there anything new coming down the pipe with the rule changes for baseball?
So let's back up a year. When the spring season last year went debunk for everyone, the NFHS had determined at that time for the sports of baseball and softball, they weren't even going to reprint new rule books for this year. It's going to be the same rule book. No changes are going to be made. They ended up making, I guess we could call it a change, but the reality, it's kind of an adjustment. So in the sport of baseball, there really is only one rule change. And I hope you don't ask me to get real specific on this, but it is related to how a designated hitter can be used. Now, I had Lou Mazzocco in here the other day, who I told you guys was the director of baseball, and he spent 30 minutes explaining it to me, and I was more confused when he walked out of my office than when he walked into my office. But it has to do with how you can use a designated hitter moving forward. That is the only rule change that is going into effect for baseball. And you'll notice I didn't say we're getting rid of the designated hitter. They have just kind of redefined how you can go about using that designated hitter on the defensive end, on the offensive end, when they check in, whenever they have a replacement, then how they can be used the rest of the game. Most of it was above my head, but I do know that that is the only rule change that is going into the sport of baseball for this spring season.
My guess is it's probably going to be more like an EH.
Yeah,
it's kind of an extra as opposed to a DH. Now we'll find out, but that's my bet going in on that one.
It has something to do with they can start the game on defense. Mm-hmm. They can hit. Yeah. Once they're replaced, they can. You guys would probably know more.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of an EH.
And the thing about it is, as the director of officials there, to me, sometimes you get these rules, as you're saying here, and my goodness, I don't know why we keep making these things more gray.
Right.
I've been officiating for 12, 13 years, and every year you're reading through the rule book and everything gets more gray. I don't understand that.
Well,
I mean,
you also
yeah.
agree the rule book never gets thinner either. It gets thicker. In other words, and by the way, that's a challenge for officials.
Yeah.
Because we never get rid of rules. We just keep adding rules, right?
Right.
And so they become more gray. They become more confusing at times for everybody, for the officials, for the coaches, for the kids, for the fans. And there's no way that they can keep up because the rules change too much. But I have noticed that is our rule books never get thinner. They do get thicker, which means it becomes everyone's going to have different opinions and get lost in the information of all the rules.
Right.
And that's a lot of times why we have controversies. Someone understands it one way and someone understands it another way.
Now, Kenny, have they decided where they're having the state finals at this year?
Yeah, state finals are going to be the same place they were last year, which is U.S. Ballpark in Ozark. Well, I say last year. We didn't play them last year. How about that? U.S. Ballpark in Ozark, Missouri, just south of Springfield.
Yeah, I know where that's at.
Okay.
Yep. That's a nice ballpark. Yeah.
It is. Very nice facility. Yeah. And the dates, class 1 and 2 are May 31st, June 1st. Class 3 and 4, June 2nd, 3rd. And class 5 and 6, June 4 and 5. So last day of May and then the first full week of June.
Now, do you guys like do that for multiple years in one place? How does that work?
Yeah, we normally we go through a process called an RFP, request for proposal. So basketball, football, baseball, it kind of depends on what the board wants to do at that particular time. But we could go anywhere between a 3-year or a 5-year proposal. Some of our bigger sports usually go through like a 4 or 5 year proposal process. So it's like for 4 or 5 years. And then when that contract runs out, when that proposal is finished, then we go through another cycle because we do want to give opportunities for venues across the state and communities across the state to see what they can't do to get our championships in their area. So we have to keep in mind physical location. That's always a sensitive topic. You would love for everything to be right in the middle of the state, but venue-wise and facility-wise, things can't always be played in the middle of the state. Example, wrestling that we normally do at Mizzou every year, Mizzou Arena, because of COVID and Boone County restrictions, that wasn't working out this year, even though so now we're over in Kansas City. We're over at Lee Summit. Actually, they start wrestling this morning at 9 o'clock. The girls did. We've not been over there before. Well, that works out great for the people from Kansas City and the west side of the state. They're loving it. People from your neck of the woods are going, okay, now we got to travel pretty far. That's not real fair. So, but we do have to look at that. But we do look at those proposals and try to give communities and venues an opportunity to see what they can do to host one of our championships. But usually it's between a 3 to 5 year agreement that we gauge into for those championships.
Very good.
Well, I think this is, what was it? The last one we had was 2019, right? Because we didn't have 20, and I think that was at where? Car Shield?
Yeah, it was a Car Shield.
Right, no Fallon.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You're exactly right.
And but that's not bad. That's not. I like that venue down there. It's easy to get to. It's not that bad. 3-hour drive, Springfield.
Well, like he said, think of the people that live down there who seem to always have to go to Kansas City, Columbia, or St. Louis. Now they're like,
right.
Now you come to me.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And I think that puts a pretty good onus on some of those schools in that area there that want to play in that, and say, hey, man, it's we get a home field advantage a little bit.
It's also neat to see how when a community gets it in that area, how kind of giddy and excited the people get because it is their one time to shine. It's their opportunity to kind of put on a show. Usually you get their best foot forward every time because it's their one opportunity to make an impression. And if they make a good impression, it bodes well for the next time the proposal comes up because we have a tendency to remember those things. Hey, they took care of us. They made it really good for the kids. The stadium was awesome. So we do take those things into consideration.
Yeah. I mean, good for them. That's awesome.
I want to finish up today. I want to ask about, you have these information meetings that are around the state. I was looking at the website and whatnot. And what are those about? What are you trying to do throughout the state here with the schools, and what do these things bring? And how can, like general pop, is it general public? Is this just for schools? How do those things work, Kenny?
It's just for schools because we are a membership organization. So our communication and everything, all of the decisions we make is not based upon anyone's opinion. It's based upon what our membership schools say this is what we would like to have happen. Just like all of our bylaws. Every bylaw that we have is not a result of the 8 people at the MSHSAA office that say, hey, let's put this in the book. It is a result of questionnaires and ballots and our membership schools basically saying this is what we want, and then they vote on it. And based upon how the votes go, that's how bylaws go in place. What you're talking about are what are called area meetings. Area meetings are things that we do in the month of January all across the state. And what we do at these meetings is throughout the course of the year, whether it's myself, Don Maurer, who's the director of cross country and track, Kevin Garner, who's in charge of basketball and soccer, all of our executives receive constant communication from our membership schools. And what we do when we have a weekly staff meeting is we talk about things that seem to be a pattern of concern, whether it's our coaches want more access to their athletes in the off season whenever they're not in their regular season, whether it's, hey, we have to tighten up these transfer rules, or whether it's we don't like this academic rule the way it is. So what happens is when we get to January, we basically come up with the topics that we feel over the past year seem to be things that we're receiving more concerns about than the norm. Okay. We share that information with all the athletic directors and the principals at these area meetings. And we ask them for input. We ask them for, hey, what about this topic? Do you guys have a concern? What's your feelings? And we basically take a straw vote in the room with a raise of the hands. How many of you would be in favor of us allowing 6th graders to play on our 7th and 8th grade middle school teams, because some of your smaller schools are having a hard time fielding a middle school softball team? So if you had 6th graders, would that give you 2 or 3 more kids? And now you can actually play, and those 7th and 8th graders can play. Well, based upon that straw poll vote, we then, if the numbers are supportive enough based upon our area meetings, we then come up with a question on our annual questionnaire, which actually is in the hands of the schools right now, whether they would like to see us move forward on it and actually put it on the ballot. If we get enough of a vote, then in the month of April, we design a ballot where the actual schools cast their one vote on whether they're in favor of something or whether they're not in favor of it. And then based upon that vote, we usually then put it into our bylaws. If it passes, and if it doesn't pass, we don't put it into our bylaws. But it's all membership school driven, but the topics are a result of things that we experience at this office that we seem to think more and more schools maybe are wanting to put in place.
It's like insider information.
That's what I'm thinking. I love this. I think this is cool. This is great information. This is stuff I've never known. My kids are out of high school now. I mean,
well, I think the other thing is too, from an outsider's point of view, for most people, they don't know who is at MSHSAA. They don't know faces. They don't know names. They just know that's where I'm going to go complain. Like literally, that's how most parents look and coaches look at it, right? So I think it's actually really good because Kenny's giving insight, just not only on that, but just how they form their districts and how they form their classes, and it's great. This is great information, Kenny. Thank you.
When we talked about the classification process earlier, that information, that was actually a 2-year process that started with our area meetings. So there isn't one school in this state that was not part of those conversations, and we got feedback, and they said, we like this about it. We don't like this about it. What should we do about this? And after 2 years, we finally came to this conclusion. Now, there are times when we do have to make those decisions one way or the other, but I can tell you that we talk about the rule books keep getting thicker. Well, the MSHSAA handbook keeps getting thicker too. But everything in that handbook.
But it's a thought process.
Yes.
It's not just winging it like, hey, let's just go by the biggest this. I mean, there's a lot that's involved in it, which is great. I think.
And we've all heard the same things in general public about, MSHA this, MSHA that. But it's so interesting when you actually can sit down with someone and say, do you realize that rule was put in effect by the very school, and the schools that you are saying are getting cheated? They're the ones that put it in place. And they're like, well, I didn't realize that. But yeah, I think these conversations are healthy so people understand that we are a membership organization and our bylaws are a result of our membership schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
And this is why we want to have these conversations. I'm trying to find information. That's why I go in and look at the website. I try and find information that I believe would be relative to people. I mean, I look at that and I go, well, I didn't know these even happened, and it's staring me right in the face. All you got to do is go look.
Right.
But I mean, in general, this isn't negative toward parents or anything like that. It's not a matter of that. It's just a lot of times we don't take the time to go and look. And we'd rather come in, or not rather, but then when we see these situations happen, we go, what happened? Why is this here? Why is it? And we don't understand, as you said, a 2-year process that led to this decision making.
Exactly. Yep.
So we appreciate that, Kenny. We appreciate it very much, man.
A lot of good information, Kenny. Thank you.
And we'll always have you back and keep talking about these things. I think it's important to have as you said, having the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've come to a realization a long time ago. People don't know what they don't know. None of us know what we don't know. So it's not, and we can only form our opinions on the information we have in front of us. So we try to give information out as much as we can so that people know. You can't fault people for having an opinion and not knowing what they don't know. That's just the way life is. Because there's a lot of things I don't know.
Yeah, get in line with the rest of us.
So, all right. Hey, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Again, we appreciate Mr. Kenny Seifert from MSHSAA coming on and talking to us about these things. Please take a few minutes, go to the website, MSHSAA.org, and inform yourself, see what's going on, stay up to date. We're going to have Kenny back again, and always a pleasure having him here talking about these things. So always remember, you pitchers, keep throwing strikes, and you hitters,
hit them where they ain't.
That's right. Everybody have a great day in the Lord, and we will see you next time.